Welcome. So, we've heard data, we've heard about mortgages, we've heard from agents, and these are recent first-time home buyers. So, maybe they came to last year's seminar, but they recently have entered the world of home ownership. So, I'm going to give you lots of great tips. So, we'll start with just some intros. And how I usually like to do this is obviously your name, and then also scale of 1 to 10, how stressful you thought the home buying process was on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most stressful. So we'll start with that. Name, scale of 1 to 10. Mickey?
Hi, I'm Mickey. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10 is about 8. Before I came here, I asked my wife, and at first, like, oh, maybe 6, but I think that's because, we're successful and we're very happy where we are, but looking back, it was definitely an 8.
Hi, my name is Christiana, and I think it was a 4 for me.
Hello? It should be. Give it a try again.
Hello?
Is there a button on there?
Is it? Yeah. Hello?
Oh.
Hello, I'm Allie, and I would say a 3, so I agree.
Hello, I'm Taina, and I would say a 6.
Okay, great. Next quick round robin question is how long, so this big question is, how long have you been in your home? People want to know how long it took, but we're going to start with how long have you been in your home, like moved in?
We've been in our place 6 months.
I've been in my place for about a year. 7 months.
7 months.
Terrific. How long did it take you to find it?
It took us about 4 months.
Okay.
3 months. I would say 6 to 8. There was a false start. So 6 once we were really ready.
Yeah, about 4 to 5. Well, 4.5.
Perfect. And how many homes did you look at before this was it?
We looked at about 6.
15.
14.
14. I like to tell people that my husband and I looked at 85. So there's like a whole wide array there. And sometimes you know exactly what you want, so it's easy, or you're looking again, as Teresa always talked about, that little grid of 4x4. But you all found your homes pretty quickly, which is great. So Christiana, we're going to start with you. You were one of the lower scores on stress. You also have wanted to buy a home since you were literally 14 and have crafted your life around making that dream happen. But at the same time, you said you found a lot of surprises during the process. So tell us kind of what were some of those moments where you said, oh my God, I didn't anticipate that this would happen.
Yeah, so I've been preparing to buy a home since I was a teenager. I grew up with parents who had bought and flipped and rented out homes, so it was something I knew that I wanted to do, but I don't think that there's anything that can really prepare you for the process until you're in it. So as much as you can read about it, there's really no feeling like going into an open house and seeing other people there and going, oh my goodness, there are other people in the world who I'm actually up against who might have more resources, or they might not be first-time home buyers. So there were surprises all along the way, I think.
Okay, yeah, great. And then, Mickey, you had a very interesting and different experience than others. As one of our agent panelists said, 99% of properties are represented by an agent. The other 1% are called FSBOs, for sale by owner, which means the owner has decided, I'm going to market and sell my property on my own. Mickey bought a FSBO. So tell us about that process, how you found it. Was it great? Was it terrible?
Yeah, it was actually interesting listening to...
And for the record, his was the highest stress. Just to point that out.
It was interesting listening to the buyer's agents, because I think if we worked with one of them, it could have been totally different, because we did actually start with an agent, but it was just the experience wasn't that great, so then we just decided to sort of see if we can find something on our own, and we just kind of lucked out. We found something on StreetEasy, and it happened so quickly. We found something on a Saturday morning. We reached out to the owner, and we saw the place on that Monday morning. and they gave us a lot of information just because there was a lot of just free flow conversations. Is there an owner or buyer? There's no one else involved. And then by that afternoon, we put an offer, and then that Thursday it was accepted. And 2 weeks later, we were on contract. It happened so fast, and it was actually a little shocking how quickly it happened. But yeah.
So just so everyone's clear, so Mickey and his wife bought a place from a owner who didn't have an agent, and they didn't have an agent. So actually an agent-free transaction, highest stress. And I actually would love to hear more. You had a bad start with an initial agent, and I think something interesting we've heard is this, I'm sorry, we're going to keep going with this dating analogy, but that maybe sometimes you have to keep looking for someone else, and that first time is not, that first date or second date, this isn't working, and instead of sort of putting that blanket on the industry as a whole, or I don't need a buy-side agent, is actually an opportunity to go try and find someone who matches your needs better.
Yeah, the agent that we did talk to, it was interesting because they definitely encouraged us to sort of expand our neighborhoods. We were looking in Jackson Heights initially, but also Woodside, Sunnyside, all those various areas, and the agent sort of was pushing us towards Forest Hills, which is actually a really nice neighborhood that we didn't really consider before. So that was definitely a really interesting experience to sort of force us to think outside the box. But as far as once we got into the whole contract, it was a little bananas because we had to rely heavily on our lawyers and then also our loan agent, which was super helpful because they answered every question we had. And then actually, since it was a co-op, the application packet took us basically several full days of just photocopying things, and it was funny. Every time there was something that was frustrating, we're like, I guess this is probably what an agent would help us with. So it was a little scary because, co-ops can be very strict about what they receive. I've heard horror stories where they reject you just because something's missing from the packet. And when you're, photocopying these things and they're huge, enormous packets, and you're like, does each copy of this have everything? So it really creates a lot of stress, and then you submit it, and then you're just waiting, and you're like, oh my God, I totally forgot to put my bank statements or something.
It worked out, though.
Yes,
so.
It did.
Good. Allie, you talk about your false start. Tell us more about that.
So my husband and I had decided we're going to buy in New York. We can see ourselves here at least 5 years. I think if I waited to say I can be here forever, I'd never have bought. So at least 5 years, we know we'll be here. And started passively looking. We'd been saving for a while. But I'm very bad at being passive, and so found a place on StreetEasy that looked really cool, went to see it. As we're walking into it, called, probably did what you guys just talked about, called an agent that had been referred to me by a friend and said, hey, I talked to you, I sent you an email that we're starting to look, we're going in to actually look at this place. I think we're going to like it. We did like it. But we're like, I don't know if we're really in the place to do this, because there are other people at the show, and we weren't certain that we were actually prepared. The place was still on the market a month later, and we're like, oh, nobody wants it. So we went back, and with our agent, walked through, put in an offer, and a week later, someone came in all cash. And so, I was barely getting to 20% down, so the fact that they had all cash was a whole nother deal, so I couldn't even be that sad that we didn't get it, because we weren't even competing. But looking back, now what I know, our agent, he's like, you don't really have quite the savings you need to have. You have like 2/3 of it, there's a third missing. That we probably need to get that in line before we're going to go down this process. So in the end, it was very good that someone else got this place, because I think we would have been in a place where we were slightly cash poor right after closing. We could have done it, but it would have been tight. And instead, we waited another 6 months, essentially, got our money in line, and bought later.
Great. Gianna, you used a Brooklyn Neighborhood Services group, really as a backbone for your search and information. And I think a lot of folks don't know that there community services out there that can help them. So tell us a little bit more about how you found out about them and what they did to help you during your process.
Yeah, so I'm part of Community Board 3 in Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, and while I was on the board, there was a presentation by Brooklyn Neighborhood Services, and they were talking about home buyers seminars, home buyer counseling, and really navigating the home buyers process. And my husband and I, we were looking on websites at homes, but what got us into the home market was that our neighbors on our block were all selling their homes, and we wanted to see how they lived. So we went inside and said, what is going on here? What's happening? And then, but it was rapid. It was a lot of turnover on the block and changes happening. So we said, well, maybe we should go into home ownership as well. So we reached out to Brooklyn Neighborhood Services, and we went through the first-time home buyers course. And I can't stress enough that it's very, 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 very helpful to go through a first-time home buyers course, because a lot of the terms, like when we went across the street, we met with agents who said, are you pre-approved? We didn't know what that was, so we said, yeah, yeah, we are. We just wanted to see the rest of the house, so we just said whatever we need to say to let them see the house, and we signed whatever we said, and they said, do you have an agent? Yeah, we do, everything. But after going through the course, we finally knew what those terms meant, what it meant to have an agent, what it meant to be pre-approved, what it meant to qualify and be an eligible first-time home buyer. And one of the interesting things as well is that they stay with you through the entire process. So not only do you complete the first-time home buyer course, but as you put in an offer and you have questions like, I don't know, the agent said this to me, they'll give you advice to the best of their ability, and up to when you put in your offer, up into closing, and then they let you fly after that. But they stay with us the entire time.
Fantastic. And similar to Allie, you also had an experience where you needed to up your budget or pad your budget a little bit. When did you have that realization?
When I realized I wasn't going to afford $1 million property in Brooklyn. So once we got the pre-approval from a bank, we had to really figure out, okay, well, we need, about $12,000 for our down payment, and we need about $18,000 on the back end for closing costs. Those are some things that we didn't know, and we talked to, not only did we realize that we wasn't going to afford $1 million, but that we also needed to start looking at renovation properties, and we started to look at distressed properties and looking at banks that would offer a 203K mortgage to us, because we knew from that point on, when we looked at a traditional bank, that we were going to go into a renovation project.
Great, and we will come back to renovations, I promise. But let's stick on budgets for a second. So most of you did not end up purchasing at the top of your budget, right? So you had your range, go here to here, here's the mega stretch, here's the maybe we didn't buy enough, and you all were somewhere in the middle of that. Mickey, I'll let you sort of chat about the advantages and disadvantages, and in the end, did it feel where you landed up like a good place? And I think often people look actually out of their range, and often we tell people it's actually really good to look at things that are way out of your budget, because you often see that you still have to make compromises. It's not like the grass is that much greener if you have, unfortunately, another $500,000. It's not this dream home waiting for you, but would love to hear your thoughts on that.
We were actually towards the top of our budget, so we did have to make some compromises. For instance, our thought was, buy a place and maybe renovate the bathroom. So that's something that's going to have to wait a little longer. But yeah, it was right there, and it's perfect.
Great.
Yeah. I'd also say that once you get kind of through the entire home buying process and you've paid your closing costs, and then you look at your bank account and you get that sinking feeling of, oh my God, I used to have so much more money. You also need to have money for afterwards, because as a homeowner, you're responsible for whatever repairs, things that come up. 1 month after I bought my place, my boiler broke, and that was just an unexpected, like, multi-$1,000 cost that I was luckily able to cover, but I just had all of these, like, nightmare scenarios of my head, and if I had bought a place that was more expensive, would I be able to, like, sustain myself for the first year of home ownership?
So we ended up purchasing definitely in the middle of our budget, which is good. There were places we looked at that were at the high end, and we knew that if we got it, we would have very little money left over, and you'll need that. Whether something goes wrong or not, you're moving into a new space. You're going to need furniture that you didn't need before, unless you don't mind looking at empty rooms. Not many, because it's New York, but one empty room. But you'll need that. There's always surprises. I would say closing costs, I agree. We wanted to have like 15 to 20K on hand for those types of things. And are we going to talk about how to set that budget?
You can go ahead.
Okay, so maybe everyone knows this, but we kind of were like, well, what can we afford? And so the way we set that, rather than looking at what you want, because you'll probably look and end up above where you can actually afford, my husband and I sat down and just looked at, okay, this is what we make, this is currently what we're paying in rent, and this is what we think we can start to save every month. And that amount of savings that we could afford was kind of like us testing ourselves for what would be our mortgage payment. So you start putting that away, and it kind of trains you to spend at a certain level, but also that money, extrapolated out can give you, okay, I'm in 600 to 800, or I'm in this range, because I know I can afford this kind of payment on a regular basis.
Yeah, we purchased at the middle as well, and similar to what Ali said, some of those costs that, we went to a renovation project that we needed, that we didn't know we needed, and some contingencies that were built into the mortgage, like replacement of windows and stucco on the side of the building. We were very happy that we didn't go towards the higher end of our budget, because we wouldn't have had money to renovate those.
Great. So lots to think about. And something Tony had mentioned also, which thankfully hasn't come up in a negative in either of the panels, but these co-op and condos, they can, the roof, there's a leak, there's floods, something happens, and your monthly charges can go up like from 1 minute to the next, and everything was planned to the dollar for you of these are my common charges or my maintenance costs, and then all of a sudden, whoa, it's double, then that can actually really put you in a bind as well. And so there is often something to be said for leaving a little bit there for the imagination. And the key is not spending it after, right on the next thing. So your neighborhoods that you ended up buying in are up on the slide behind. But curious to hear, is that where your search started? So did you buy in the neighborhood, like when Teresa talked about her 4x4 grid, right? We all start with a little pocket. How many of you actually purchased in the neighborhood you thought you were going to live in?
We did, but if we looked first, and then we ended up looking a whole ton of other places, but we were very happy to end up back where we started.
Great.
Yeah, I would say Park Slope was at the top of my list. I looked everywhere towards the beginning of my search, but as I kind of narrowed in, I knew that I wanted to be somewhere close to that area.
Looked almost everywhere. In the end, your commute really helps dictate the neighborhoods that you'll consider. We considered Brooklyn for a hot second, and Queens. Even looked at the South Bronx, but we'd been living in East Harlem for 5 years, liked it, wanted to live in Harlem, of course, because it's very cool, but didn't actually like what we could afford there, so we just kept moving up, and loved Washington Heights when we ended up seeing it. So we're mostly eventually focused in on Washington Heights and Inwood, knowing North Manhattan could work for us.
So my husband and I, we have 2 daughters, and we wanted to live close to Highland Park, which is not quite Bushwick, but is also by Cypress Hills, and the park also meets Glendale in Queens. So we were looking 4x4 in that area, but we continuously was getting priced out or outbid, one of the two. When multiple offerings when we put in our offer. But it wasn't until we actually found East Flatbush by chance. It wasn't until there was a HUD, and if any of you are familiar with HUD homes, you place a bid on a property, and the next day they tell you whether or not your bid was accepted. So the first time we did that was in Queens, in Richmond Hill, and wasn't accepted. It was a two-family. And then the second time we did that, it was in East Flatbush. And we said, oh, wow, look at this neighborhood over here. So we started honing in on that neighborhood, and then that's where we ended up buying.
Great. So doesn't sound like too many compromises, right? Neighborhood-wise, everyone ended up in a good spot. Other compromises that you might have made along the way? We'll start with you, Mickey.
The big compromise for us involved a flip tax for the co-op. A lot of co-ops have flip tax, but ours is significantly higher than normal.
And will you explain for folks in case they don't know what it is?
So basically, a flip tax is a certain percentage of your sale price goes back to the co-op. It could be 2%, 5%, but ours is significantly higher. And basically, the pros and cons of, well, if we want to sell this in 5 years, it's 25% that's going to go back to them. But we sort of had a long conversation, like, well, we're actually looking at this as a long-term thing, 10 years, maybe more. So we're like, well, this is not only an investment, but it's a home, and we don't, in 10 years, 15 years, we don't think it's going to be, something that would be worth sacrificing the opportunity to live there.
And do you think that gave you negotiating power? Like, was the co-op you bought priced less than comparables in the neighborhood because of the flip tax?
Actually, the comps were exactly the same, okay. But we felt that it was almost undervalued just because of the size and the location and sort of what the area and the building offers.
Great. Christiana?
So I think going into the home buying process in New York, you kind of know that you're going to be, or you're probably going to be, a pretty small fish in a really big pond. So knowing ahead of time what are your must-haves, nice-to-haves, and then things you can compromise on early, that's really helpful. So the things that I compromised on were being a little bit farther out than I wanted to be, but I made myself this big long list of a mathematical model that I put together that was well, this means more to me than that, and so if you kind of add up this aggregate score, it kind of works out that it's okay. So I think I hit enough of the must-haves, nice-to-haves to make up for the slightly longer commute.
Well, where we were in East Harlem, we had outdoor space. We were in a tiny, not that great apartment, but probably equal space outside. So it would have been amazing to be able to keep that, but we essentially would have had to give up probably 300 square feet in what we ended up having if we were really going to require outdoor space, just because it's so hard to come by. So in the end, that's what we gave up, was that space. But I think I thought we would miss it a lot more than we do. And now actually our apartment itself is much nicer than what our old place was, so we needed the outdoor space to escape from it. So now it's actually no, I like being inside now. And there's parks outside too, so we can get there a different way.
Yeah, we compromise. When we started our search, we started looking at a lot of condos and co-ops, and we realized that we possibly needed more space. We didn't want to share one bathroom anymore. So when we worked with our realtor, Raul, we kind of said, no, we want we want 2 bathrooms. No matter where it is, it could be in Queens, it could be in Brooklyn, we just need at least 2 bathrooms. But that meant that we no longer are going to look at the co-ops and the condos by Highland Park, that now we're going to have to start looking at maybe 1-family and or 2-family homes in order to accommodate what we wanted.
Great. So always trade-offs, right, in any big purchase like this. And again, I always think it's really important. It is good to look well above your budget because there are still trade-offs. There is no silver bullet when you add, if you stretch yourself, if you add a couple hundred to your budget, usually you're still going to give up something or get something else, and you'll have that need to have, must have, which is a great way of organizing those thoughts. So we'll keep you both on the hot seat there at the end. You both did renovations. So something that, and that was a question that came up on the agent panel, is it a plus, is it a minus, something you were planning to do, knew you wanted to do, or something that just became a necessity based on the place that you bought?
Yeah, it became a necessity. It became a necessity given our price point. To your point, we did look at things that were way off our price point. We wanted to see what was out there, and that helped guide us into what we can put in something that we needed to fix up. We did not budget as much as we thought that, pretty much we went over. Mm-hmm. But what was great about Brooklyn Neighborhood Services and any other first-time home counseling agency is that they have grants. So we weren't eligible for the city grants or the state grant, but this individual organization had a grant, which is acquisition and renovation grant, which helps out tremendously because it was $27,000 towards your home. So we factored that much. We put aside we put like $2,000 down on our, because you have to put money down on the down payment, and the rest of the money goes to renovation. You have the flexibility to choose how you want to split that up. So we split it up with the $2,000 towards the down payment and then everything else on the property. And they also provided the contractor. Working with the contractor, it was, we didn't anticipate. We didn't anticipate a lot of things. We had to do the entire electrical over. And when you're a renter, boiler, radiator, electrical, like someone else does that. So when they're like, no, you have to do it, not only are you have to be hip to being a first-time home buyer, you have to be hip to being a home owner. You have to know what you're going to have to renovate in the future, what you're going to start with. So we initially started with the first floor and the basement, and some of the things that we're going to have to do later on, like the roof and maybe the boiler, things like that. So it's lovingly a project. Our home is now our project that, just built us together. And we're like, what are we going to work on this year? What are we going to work on next year? So the renovation process started that off, but it definitely, we thought it was like, oh, well, you put money aside in renovation and you're done. And it's like, no, you're not done. It's always going to be a project, loving project, but I'm very happy with the way that it's shaping out.
Right.
So when we went and saw the place that we ended up buying, I loved it because I love so many things about it, like the floors, the light, all those types of things that you notice after you've seen so many apartments. But it was old. It was a co-op. It was pre-war. It had all these different rooms. And so I knew immediately what I want to do is take out half these walls so we have this free flow of space to hang out in. We don't need 2 bedrooms. Can we open up that wall and make it more living space? But that's hard to do right after you put in a down payment on a house. And so when we were in the negotiating process, we pushed our agent to say, hey, if we come in under, can we negotiate? It was a sponsor sale. So you probably can't do this with a random person selling their apartment that they want to get out of. But on a sponsor sale, I think sometimes you have more flexibility. And so we said, hey, we're coming in under, you want this. If we meet you halfway, will you take out some of these walls? And we're happy to delay a month moving in. And we essentially made a punch list of what needed to be done in order for us to close, which was removing 3 walls. And for them, that was a manageable amount of work, not moving electrical, not moving plumbing. But it made the space exorbitantly different from where it started, made us so much happier, and it was work we would have done. And the biggest thing is, it's money that got rolled into our mortgage that we're now paying off, rather than, I don't know, the $20,000 we would have had to pay up front if we were to do the renovation after. So for us, that was great, because we didn't have to pay it all up front, so we kind of got to put it away, and now we're paying it off.
Fantastic. And that's, every situation is different, and back to Allie, your story particularly is interesting in that false start, right, where an apartment that probably for a bunch of reasons was not right, And then here you've ended up in a place where you've really been able to make the system work for you and end up with something even better and more money still in the bank, which is great. So we're going to move to questions shortly, so make sure you're putting them into Slido. But before, we're going to do a back to 1 to 10. How happy are you that you bought? 10 being the happiest. And then a bit of advice that you would bestow, something you wish that you knew as a first-time home buyer that you can bestow onto our audience of soon-be home buyers. So Mickey, go ahead.
Definitely 10. We're super happy with where we live. And I think the number one thing I would recommend is having your finances in order. In particular, if you're fortunate to have family that might want to bestow a gift of money, have that sorted out sooner than later. Even if you don't have a place, it is the banks they want a money trail for everything, which can involve getting letters from people, and it's a hassle that is best resolved sooner than later.
Also 10, I've always rented in New York before, and there's such a sense of grounding when you have your own place. I mean, it also comes with like a niggling anxiety that you have to be responsible for this place, but it's great to feel like you really have a place that's your own. I would definitely echo the finances point. That's really, really critical that you have your finances in order, but also being aware of everything that you need to be responsible for after you close, which includes the closing costs, but then also, as some people here have mentioned, repairs that you might have to do, renovations. It doesn't end once you close.
Yeah, it was a great nugget of after you home buy, you home own, which is a significant responsibility.
I agree, 10. Until something goes wrong, and then it'll probably be a 5, and then it'll go back to a 10. So far, nothing's gone wrong, knock on wood. But my advice is there's 2 major investments you make in your life. One is your 401k, and you if you're like me, you're pretty passive about it. It's sitting there, and you're hoping it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. But the second one is buying a home. And so don't be passive about it, because it's the thing you have the option to be very active about. Do your research. I looked at StreetEasy. I did a lot of reading on Brick Underground. They have some fantastic breakdowns of what's a co-op, what's a condo. Because I started from zero, much like everyone does. And so I would just say that. And even though you have your agent, and of course they're a great resource, you need to be looking out for you, because they definitely want you to get the house you want, but they also want to close the sale, so you have to fight for what you want. And my agent probably wasn't super excited that I decided we want to add renovations to this, and we want to do all these things, because it prolongs the process, but we fought for that. We wouldn't have gotten that if we just said, sure, we'll just pay less and go with it. We'd be doing those renovations 6 months down the line on our own. So know what you want and ask for it, because the worst they can say is no.
I'm laughing because you brought up the analogy about the dating. I had 3 dates. So I had 3 realtors, 2 at the same time. So I was testing the waters. But yeah, that brings up a good point. For my husband and I believe it's a 10. We really enjoy our home. We really enjoy the process. The renovation, as stressful as it was, I'm surprised I didn't go to 8-2 with the stressful level. But we're really comfortable with where we are right now, where we landed. The advice that I want to give is you can plan for the down payment, you can plan for the closing costs, but be aware that there are some hidden fees that we weren't made aware of. We had to pay for appraisals, we had to pay for inspection, home inspection, title, and because we were going into a renovation, we actually had to put about $10,000 in escrow to secure the property. And it's like, who has that lying around? So when you brought up the gifts, we had to get that letter from our family members who, we owe a lot to secure the property. But that was something that just threw us an entirely different direction. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's great to have a support system if it's not your agent, but someone who's going to navigate the process for us. Again, it was, Brooklyn Neighborhood Services. Our realtor, one of the realtors, right, and was dating. But no, the final one that we closed with, Raul, from Citizen International, he was there with us as well, and he was understanding, like, no, they really want this property. We really need this property. And on hands was on deck. Even our lender and your lawyer. Your lawyer is key. I know you mentioned it earlier, but your lawyer is pretty much key, because after your realtor hands you off, your lawyer is really that number one person who's doing the work, who's adding those. No, we want you to pay that first bill water tax, not the buyer paying that first bill. The first bill, or we want you to pay the taxes, not the buyer. So having those conversations at the back end really can help you secure that property.
Great. Thank you. A lot of people interested in how you time the end of your rental lease to then moving into your new apartment. So, Mickey, we'll start with you.
We actually really lucked out. Our lease ended the same time that our mortgage started, but that really just was happenstance. It could have gone a lot of different ways. I think it's the kind of thing you just have to hope it lines up. At least that's how it did for us. So we were just very lucky that everything closed literally 2 weeks before our lease was up.
Mine did not line up at all. So I bounced back and forth between Airbnbs for like a little over a month. I mean, I was buying on my own, and so I didn't have to worry about moving a ton of furniture or another person, but I lived out of a suitcase. It was a cool experience, though, and I got to see a lot of different neighborhoods. I specifically got Airbnbs in the neighborhoods I wanted to look in, just to make it easier to know what it would be like to live in those neighborhoods and see what the commutes were like. But it was kind of tricky.
Well, we'd been living in East Harlem in the same building for 5 years, so we had a really good relationship with our landlord, and maybe this isn't the case for all, but again, I always ask, so why don't you ask for what you want? So we told them, we said, hey, Shai, we're going to be looking at places to live, to stay forever, 5 years, as much as I can commit to, and in return, if you'll let us kind of do this kind of, almost like a month-to-month agreement, which is not common in New York, we'll give you an extra heads up. We'll give you 2 months, or we'll give you 3 months, because this is a long process usually. We'll let you know when we think we've found it. We'll keep you informed as we're going through the process. And he was happy to do that for us. Because we had that relationship, we'd been living there for 5 years, he trusted us. We were apparently not annoying tenants. And we did give him 2 months for us moving out.
Yeah, we didn't have much difficulties. We also were month to month, but we've been with the same landlord for about 6 years. So that wasn't anything to worry about. And what was one of the cool things is while we were transitioning out, we were able to stay while the renovations was happening. Because legally you can't go into a home that doesn't have plumbing or electrical. In New York City, you have a right to shelter. So we worked out a lot of those things while we're waiting for the house to be built or completed.
Great. So all pretty, but in general, sounds. I think Allie's totally right with all of these things. Is just ask for the worst is your landlord says no, or just ask for what you need and hopefully you can get it. So moving on to down payments, a couple questions here about that. So one of the questions is if people are willing to answer what percentage you put down, and then also some questions about if any of you use down payment assistant programs. So, Tiana.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier, but in terms of percentage, it's 3.5% that we put down, and the rest, the $2,000 came from the grant, and that was suitable enough for our home. But other than that, we weren't eligible for some of the city and the state down payment assistance programs.
Okay. So we put 20% down on our apartment, and that false start where we needed more money to really get to the next stage, we essentially knew we could either have that money in a year with more savings, or we could see if we could get a loan from one of our parents. Not my parents, but my husband's parents. And so, and what we looked at was the market. And we're like, in New York City, if we just save for another year, the market's going to increase that much in another year, and we're going to be pushed further and further out, was our thinking, just because of the way real estate changes. And so we ended up getting a loan from one of our parents, and I would just look into the details if you guys consider this. There's amounts that can be given to you without tax, and there's amounts that if you go over that, you're going to start being taxed in your income. And so just know those differences, and then we're paying back that money now to his parents over the next essentially 5 to 7 years.
I put 21% down because there's a threshold for the size of mortgage that you get. If I had put 20% down, I would have met the threshold for a jumbo mortgage, which is over $500,000. So I wanted to, and then the interest rates go up and there's more fees. So I got right under that.
Yeah, we put down 20%, which is why I was sort of putting the emphasis on that, making sure your finances are in order, and if you have to borrow money, because it, like I said, it's just a big hassle otherwise.
Yeah, great. It keeps, and obviously I've spoken to all of you before this, but so well prepared, all of you, and well versed. I mean, just for all of you out there, like, you really know your stuff. Fantastic. And then you're all 10s, so it worked out. It worked out really nicely. Inspection. So, did any of you have your places inspected, and where did you find your inspector? We'll start front.
We didn't, actually.
Yeah. We didn't either. Don't feel bad.
I inspected it, so like I walked around and like I was like, it looks great. But I mean, well, first, my place is not that big, so I was just like, fingers crossed, I hope nothing breaks. And then the first month, my boiler broke. But, you know, just be prepared. Just know that that's going to happen if you don't have an inspector.
We did not. And my impression had been that you use an inspector when you're buying a freestanding home. And we were buying an apartment in, of course, a larger building, so we thought we were probably okay doing that.
Yes. We used him twice, John Esposito. He, the first home that we looked at, we thought everything was great. And then we realized after the inspection that the building was collapsing on its side. And upon his recommendation that we wouldn't have to purchase a hydroponic, I don't know, something to pin the house up as it was falling on the neighbor's house. So we were so thankful that we had that one. And that was when we had an offer accepted and everything, and we had a home inspection, and that happened. And this home, we wanted to make sure it was sound, given that the first floor didn't really have any walls. And he was like, no, this is fine. I could actually do this myself if I had to renovate it. So, yes, I would encourage, if you are buying a freestanding home, just please get a home inspector.
Yeah. And then, you know, when you buy a condo or a co-op, part of the due diligence should be that that condo or co-op has minutes from their board meetings. And those minutes are meant to highlight issues that you should, like, oh, the roof got inspected, right, is a red flag to your lawyer that they need to ask a question, or there's an assessment coming. But those minutes are critical, which is also why your lawyer is critical, because your lawyer will review all of those minutes. And some smaller buildings aren't great about their minutes, but that's a piece of information that sometimes is more powerful than an inspection. In some of these bigger buildings where you can't really inspect the roof of a giant, you know, condo or co-op, they probably won't even let you up there. And then there's no way to really assess that. So this is also a place where you need that team of experts to help you navigate, is this a place where I need an inspection, do I not, type of thing. But a freestanding home, for sure, is a place. Were you going to add something? Or?
Yeah, so my lawyer had also, I put in a bid on a place that was at the very top of my budget. My lawyer looked through the minutes and had found that there was 2 outstanding lawsuits from the building, like the homeowners against the building developer for building defects. So that saved my life. So absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. And again, that's why the lawyer is really, really critical.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, so we purchased our home through a bank, so it was as is. So it was kind of like, oh yeah, we need to make sure that this one is getting inspected.
Back to the home search. Who found your home, and what was your communication like with the agent? So, you know, people still asking that, who found it, you or them or you, where? So we'll go quickly. We'll keep going down the line.
My wife did on a Saturday morning.
Nice. And where?
StreetEasy.
Okay. Great. You can all go home.
I found my home also on StreetEasy, and I went I was the first person at the first open house. I went with my agent, and I made an offer on the spot.
We found it via StreetEasy, and I would also say it's very common to look at open houses without your agent. So don't be alarmed. We probably went to 80% of our open houses without them because it would just slow you down to align schedules. They can always go later because they have more free time during the day when you're at work.
We found it, but we subscribe to multiple websites, and yeah.
Great. And then what else? So question here from a few folks. Is it common practice that your agent refers your legal representation? No, and they should not. And Teresa and Krista will give me the head nod on that. But that's something you should find separately. There's a bit of a conflict there, so you should find them separately. But your agent can help you find a lender. They can make recommendations of folks that they work with from a mortgage perspective. So I don't know from your experience how you found your individual team members, we can maybe end on that as we're wrapping up here, but where you found your agent, where you found your lawyer, where you found your lender.
Just make sure everyone is separate. Please make sure everyone is separate. Your lawyer shouldn't know your realtor, shouldn't know your lender, vice versa. The lender shouldn't know. Just make sure everyone is separate. I found my lawyer through my job. I found the realtor, Brooklyn Neighborhood Services referred the realtor. And the lender, we made sure, we were looking for a 203K, so we were looking for any lender, and I think New York State has a directory, I don't remember where I looked, but any lender that offered a 203K, and we looked at 3 banks, M&T, another one, but Quantic, and we ended up closing with Vanguard that no longer does mortgages, and they're not even a bank, they were a lending company. So I just wanted to make sure, and also the course said make sure that everyone is separate, because I did find while searching throughout our 15 or 14 homes that it can get muddled really quickly when you're searching.
And I found my agent, it was a referral from someone I worked with. Who's probably 80% of what we needed, but it was good enough. Found our lawyer through our landlord. We asked, because this guy owned multiple buildings, so we asked him, who have you been using? He's clearly good. And so used him, and then used Wells Fargo for our mortgage. And they actually were the ones that were most aggressive in a good way about making the process move. At one point was yelling at the other people, asking them why they didn't have their stuff together. So, I mean, we actually really appreciated that. So yeah, but all very separate.
I got all of my different team members through referrals, also through either friends or coworkers. I would say if you're working with someone that you don't jive with or that you don't feel like is giving you good service or the respect that you deserve, go find someone else. I worked with a mortgage broker who was a complete jackass, and I really wish that I had been more aggressive about finding someone else.
Our lawyer we found through a friend. The lawyer had worked with a few of our friends, and it was a great fit. And then we just went to our bank where our accounts were already, and actually that worked out really well because everything is now just still in one place.
Excellent. Well, cannot thank you all enough for giving up your Saturday, and you've already bought your home, so thank you. And similar to the agents, these fine folks will also be in the lobby if you want to bombard them, and hopefully you've learned enough about them where if there's a particular question, you know who to aim it at. good luck. So they'll be in the lobby. And thank you all very, very much. There'll be all of this on the StreetEasy blog after, and you'll also get an email survey so you can tell us how we can improve this for next time. But thank you.